David is also in Whitby, where the notoriously dangerous coastline saw one of the biggest shipping disasters in the history of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. This even went on to prompt a rethink on how the RNLI functioned in UK waters. He's visiting the Whitby Lifeboat Museum to learn more about that fateful day from curator and retired coxswain Peter Thomson.
That's a fine model of a ship, Pete. What are we looking at?
Now, this is the famous Rohilla. She was a hospital ship with 229 people on board. It was bound for Dunkirk, pick up wounded soldiers, basically from the front of the First World War.
The people on board were mostly medical staff and the ship's crew. Sadly, though, the Rohilla never made its final destination as, struck by a huge storm, it was swept off course. As a result of the German naval attack that Anita learned about yesterday, there was a coastal blackout, and the ship ran onto a mile-long rock known as the Whitby Scar. The impact split the vessel into 3 parts.
And that would be the first notification that there was a ship ashore, and that's the way the rest of the town would find out.
The dangerous state of the seas meant that the lifeboat couldn't leave from its normal launch site. So the volunteer crews had to move the boat to a safer location position opposite the wreck. This involved lifting the lifeboat over an 8-foot wall and then carrying it another quarter of a mile.
She was dragged by several hundred people. It was damaged in the process of this, so it was damaged before it actually left the shore.
Those waters must have been absolutely hell on earth.
I would imagine surf running in from the Rohilla would be anything like 12, 15 foot high. So this little boat trying to get out through these huge breakers to get alongside and rescue them must have been a fantastic feat in itself. It took off the first 17 people and landed them back through the waves into the surf for a second time, and a further 18 people were rescued. When she got back from that trip, after hitting the rocks, it was so badly damaged that it had to be abandoned, and that's where we had to call for help from further stations.
3 other lifeboats from neighbouring towns, one motorised, tried and failed to help.
And were people stuck on the boats? Were they in the water? What was happening?
No, the survivors would be mustered in around the wheelhouse. People were seen by the crowds on the cliff to be jumping into the sea and trying to swim for it. A lot was saved by Whitby people on the scar itself, wading into the water and pulling them out. Many, many died in desperation. They just jumped over into the water and that was it.
Time was running out for the passengers. They were now entering their 3rd day stranded, and the storm was showing no signs of abating. Finally, a lifeboat from over 50 miles to the north was called upon to assist.
And what happened next?
The final thing was to try and get a motor lifeboat down from the Tyne, and they decided to sail through the night the 50-odd mile from Tynemouth down to Whitby, which they did through the full storm, and everything went well. They took our second coxswain, and he then acted as pilot. They went out through the storm, round to the wreck, and managed to get the last 50 survivors.
Until now, motorised lifeboats were in the very early stages of development and were few and far between.
On this occasion, when everything failed with a rowing lifeboat, and of course the motor one succeeded, then the RNLI quite rightly said, now is the time to put a motor lifeboat in Whitby.
So the disaster then was a catalyst for change?
It was, and a big step. And the RNLI realised, and so did lifeboatmen, that oars were no longer the ideal way for saving life.
Many interesting artefacts were found at the time of the wreck, but perhaps the most fascinating was discovered in 2014, a trunk belonging to Mary Roberts, the only female stewardess on the Rohilla. She was no stranger to shipping disasters, having also survived the most famous shipwreck of all time, the Titanic.
That's fantastic. So 100 years, or well, certainly to the year,
Yeah.
the trunk comes back. Mary's trunk. Now, I don't know whether Mary was lucky or unlucky. What are your thoughts?
Well, she has been known to have said that of the two disasters, the Rohilla was the worst to experience because of the severity of the weather. Titanic was huge, but it was flat calm. So her experience of the Rohilla certainly stuck with her.
2014 marked the centenary of Rohilla's fateful journey, but the memory of that traumatic day and the courage of the people of Whitby and its surrounding towns lives on. 84 people died on that ship, but over the course of 3 days, against all the odds, the RNLI managed to save 145 souls, and their bravery was rewarded with the Gold Medal of the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, the highest honour of its kind.